Hi, welcome to What Are You Reading? A podcast by the Public Library of Mount Vernon in Knox County. I'm Christy.
And I'm Katie.
And today we are going to be talking about My Wicked, Wicked Ways by Sandra Cisneros. This is part of our NEA Big Read program, which is a program of the National Endowment of the Arts in partnership with Arts Midwest. We have been celebrating Sandra Cisneros and her work all month. So we decided to also include a poetry collection. Since we did House on Mango Street last month, the short story collection, we were like, hey, let's see what the poetry side of Sandra Cisneros is like.
Yeah, and as an aside, we still have copies of House on Mango Street. So if you would like to come and get a free copy of the book, they are right inside the back door.
Absolutely. And you can always stop up and ask us as well. As of this recording, we still have plenty. So just give us a call, stop by, and pick up a copy. I personally am not a poetry person. So this was a little daunting to me. Like the idea of picking up this book, I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to feel about this just because I'm not a poetry person. Even though I did really like Wilder poetry that I talked about a couple podcasts ago, that was like kind of my first jump into since college poetry.
Yeah, and I will say I do like poetry. As a general rule, but this was a little denser than what I'm used to. It definitely is like more of a college. This is the first time I've been challenged in a while reading poetry. A lot of poetry nowadays is it's still very sparse and lyrical, but it has like a main layer to it, and then you can dig deeper if you want to, but you understand on top. This one, I feel like you had to, with a lot of them, you needed to sit with them and work through them to understand what was going on. So it's not, and I think this was printed in the 80s. So yeah, if you read like Ruby Carr or R.H. Sin, this is going to be completely different.
Yeah, I did mark quite a few that, I mean, honestly, I have questions about. There were quite a few that I loved, too.
Yes.
That I thought were really great. And I also really, which you had mentioned this earlier, because Katie started reading before I did. Even the preface is written in prose. So it was very interesting to me that this does really talk about a lot of the role of women, and Sandra Cisneros specifically being really like the first artist in the family. A family of, the working men were the working people. Women were wives and mothers and, handled the domestic side of things. And so she does mention in the preface, my first felony I took up with poetry. For this penalty, the rice burned. Mother warned I'd never wife. And that really did set the tone for the rest of the book, I felt.
Yeah, and there are a lot of similar themes in this book that were also in Mango Street. Just subverting expectations for what a woman is supposed to be through her culture, and even we've experienced as growing up as women that there are expectations there. And when you don't meet those expectations, there's conflict. So, and that's what I kind of drew to in the poetry, especially Six Brothers was one, and then the other one that I marked that I really liked the end to it was his story.
Oh, okay.
So his story is she's describing her father and kind of his expectations of what the family would do.
Mm-hmm.
So, actually, no, it wasn't this one. But he's kind of warning her
Mm-hmm.
that it says, a girl with both my names was arrested for audacious crimes that began by disobeying fathers.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then someone else said he too knew a Sandra Cisneros who was 3 times cursed a widow.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, tread carefully.
Yes, yes, in all things.
Yes, in everything. Oh, yeah, it is. And then the last stanza kind of made me laugh, and because my family is kind of experiencing that too, and it's like 6 sons, my father groans, all home, and 1 female gone.
Yeah. Yeah, and what's really interesting is she mentions, that she's left before the brothers there.
Mm-hmm.
And she's the one that they expected to stay home as the
Mm-hmm. female.
And here she is out on her own, wanting to do her own thing. And especially something so foreign as being an artist,
Mm-hmm.
Being a writer, a poet is not something that they expected.
Yeah.
And not expected from a son even,
Yes.
So not only is she female, she's an artist.
Yeah, because there's, I think it's in 6 Brothers, where it's like which is almost universal, that parents can plan a path for their children.
Mm-hmm.
So it's oldest, you're a doctor, second administration, and then he gets to her because she must be the 3rd born, and is like,
Mm-hmm.
well, you should have been a weather reporter.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next one can be a musician, and then an athlete, and then a genius.
Mm-hmm.
And her youngest brother is like, oh, well, you'll take over the business. So when they were born, their dad had an expectation of what they were going to be. And for some reason, Sandra doesn't.
Yeah, she doesn't fit that mold.
She doesn't fit the mold. She's okay with not fitting the mold.
Yeah.
And I've read some of her essays as well, where her father does eventually come to terms with the life that she has chosen.
Mm.
But it takes a little while.
I would see, because like you mentioned before, House on Mango Street, and this having those similar themes running through it, how important her father is to her and his expectations, and how she's constantly fighting against that, and especially in My Wicked Wicked Ways, discussing, like I mentioned in the preface, how it's wicked, it's like a felony, like she's committed a crime by being who she is, and accepting who she is, and not falling into those preconceived notions and roles that not only her family but society where she's growing up has decided they think she should go.
Yeah.
And that leads me into one of my other favorites, which was the poet reflects on her solitary fate. And I loved that we get very autobiographical here. And she mentions she lives alone now, has abandoned the brothers, the rooms of fathers, and many mothers. They have left her to her own device, her nightmares and pianos. She owns a lead pipe. The stray lovers have gone home. The house is cold. There is nothing on TV. She must write poems. She feels like she doesn't have anything other than that at this current time, that she needs to produce the art. She needs to write these poems. She's chosen this life, and she does seem to struggle with that throughout the poems of loneliness, isolation, and how hard that can be to accept when you feel like you've done it to yourself, but you have no other choice.
Yeah, because from beginning to end, she's doing who she is. And it can be exhausting when you're trying to get the people that you want their approval and the people you love to just accept and understand. And I think that's kind of where like that second stanza was going. It's like they left her to her own device. Mm-hmm. So it's like, fine, you go do what you're doing, and then she's left completely alone.
Yeah, absolutely. There was kind of there was a bit of a sadness, I think, to a lot of the poems here, but there is also a celebration and just living that duality of having to be in both of those worlds.
Well, yeah, which I think is kind of universal for us, because there's always who we are, like the private person versus the public person. Like it or not, there are people that we need to get approval from. But there also needs to be that space where we can be 100% who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the more that we talked about this, the more that we kind of sat with it, even though it was dense or a little bit harder to wrap our heads around than we are used to, that also gives that sense of accomplishment, I think. So this is accessible to everyone if you're willing to put in just a little bit more work.
Yeah.
A little bit more thought.
Yeah, and because in preparation for this, I was just trying to get through as many as I could. And one of the things that we've talked about is there are some cultural references in here, well, pop culture references. So I had to looked up one, and I feel like I need to look up the rest of them. And incidentally, we had talked about My Wicked, Wicked Ways is also the title of the biography of Errol Flynn. So, which was written before this book. So I would like to dig in and see how much of a connection Cisneros wanted to get from that.
Yeah, absolutely, because she does mention in one of the poems here, Errol Flynn, her father reminding her of Errol Flynn. So yeah, there's a couple in here that we were kind of talking about wanting to do more research on. And that's a really good thing to have. You know, the collection of poetry or short stories or even a book where they mention something and you say, you know what, I'm going to know more.
Yeah, and that's something we've talked about on the podcast before, reading about historical figures and then diving down that rabbit hole.
Absolutely. Like when we had our guest Lehman Kessler on talking about the Knife Man and how that got us excited about learning more and saying, oh, I want to know more about this person. You know, so this definitely did that too, and made me want to think more critically. Because I have been reading a lot of fluff. Like, let's be honest, like the world is going through a lot right now, and it's really hard to stay positive. And so I've been filling my time with fluffy stuff, which, spoiler alert, next month is going to be fluff.
For both of us.
Yes. So we decided, like, okay, we're going to do something fun, you know, and kind of try to find light wherever we can. And there is light in here as well. So that is something to look forward to with this. And even though we said, and we've mentioned multiple times, it's a little dense, if you're not a poetry person, this might seem daunting, but it really isn't. When you stop and think about it, you stop and talk with other people. And that's important too. It's getting us talking about issues, about things that we've dealt with as women, or that even, you know, any gender can look at this and say, there's something here that I can relate to. My relationship with my family, my relationship to the world as a whole based on my gender, whatever that may be. So there is a lot to gain from this.
Yeah. Yeah. And shameless plug, we are having a book discussion for My Wicked, Wicked Ways. So please come.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
We're going to have Crystal Salas is coming back. So we will have someone who is a poet.
Yes, absolutely.
That can help us figure out these poems.
Yes, absolutely. And if you have any questions or you're interested in talking about this, please feel free to reach out to us, and we can all kind of work on this together as well. We encourage that with any of the books we talk about on our podcast, because we love to talk books, and we would love to get everybody else as interested in some of these titles as we are. And that's something that we hope to resume here soon, is book discussions regularly, even outside of the podcast. So, coming in and talking with other people that love books as much as we do is always something we look forward to. So,
yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us for another What Are You Reading podcast. Again, we want to just thank Jamie Lynn Smith-Fletcher for the work she did getting us in with the NEA Big Read, and special thanks to Sandra Cisneros and Crystal A.C. Salas for being so amazing through helping us, dissect all of this awesome lit. So, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff, and we will see you on the next one. Bye.
Bye.